The Vampire King had been living in apartment 7B for 40 years, and no one in the building knew what he was. Gemma Oakes knew the stairwell better than most people knew their own hands. 7 flights, each with 19 steps except the 4th, which had 20 because of some architect's miscalculation decades ago. A burnt-out bulb on the 3rd landing that the landlord never replaced. A folding chair on the 5th that had been there so long it had become part of the architecture, draped with abandoned mail and takeout menus. On the windowsill between the 6th and 7th floors sat a jar of strawberry jam that had survived 2 winters, its label sun bleached to illegibility, a monument to someone's forgotten optimism. She climbed these stairs every night at midnight after her shift at St. Catherine's Hospital, where she worked in the kitchen preparing meals for patients who rarely tasted them. 4 grocery bags cut into her palms, handles thin as wire, digging red lines across her skin. Milk, bread, eggs, whatever had been on sale. Rice in bulk, canned soup. The elevator had been broken since before she moved in 3 years ago, and the landlord's promises to fix it had become a running joke among the tenants. Gemma was 24, and her knees already ached like she was 50. She paused on the first landing, shifted the bags, kept climbing. The stairwell smelled like old concrete and whatever the Hendersons on 3 were cooking, something with curry that made the walls sweat. She counted steps without thinking, a meditation born of exhaustion. On the 2nd landing, she stopped because someone was standing there. He was tall enough that his white hair nearly brushed the ceiling fixture, dressed in dark clothes that looked expensive in a way she couldn't name, all clean lines and perfect fit. His skin was pale as printer paper, and when he looked at her his eyes were the color of winter ice, nearly colorless. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just reached out and took 2 of her grocery bags from her hands with a movement so smooth it was already done before she thought to protest. "I can carry them myself," she said, but he was already climbing. He moved beside her, silent, not looking at her, not looking at anything in particular. At the 3rd landing, he continued. At the 4th, she found herself keeping pace with him, the remaining bags suddenly feeling lighter just because someone else was carrying half the burden. At the 5th landing, past the eternal folding chair. At the 6th, past the jam jar catching moonlight. At the 7th, her floor, where he walked directly to her door as if he'd always known which one was hers. He set the bags down gently, straightened, and walked 3 doors down to 7B. His door closed with a quiet click, and Gemma stood in the hallway holding 2 bags of groceries and a head full of questions. The next night, the same. She came home at midnight, and he was waiting on the 2nd landing. Took 2 bags, climbed beside her, set them at her door. Disappeared into 7B without a word. The 3rd night, the 4th, the 5th. She started expecting him, started noticing details. The way he moved with a grace that seemed choreographed, every gesture economical and precise. The way he never seemed to breathe hard despite 7 flights of stairs. The way his footsteps made almost no sound. He wore different clothes each time, but they were all the same kind of quality, dark and well-made, slightly old-fashioned in their cut. By the 2nd week, she tried to thank him. "You don't have to do this," she said on the 4th landing, and he turned his head slightly, acknowledged her words with the smallest nod, and kept climbing. By the 3rd week, she tried introducing herself. "I'm Gemma, 7A. He was already at her door, setting down the bags. She thought maybe she saw the corner of his mouth move, almost a smile, but he was gone before she could be sure. By the 4th week, she'd asked around. Mrs. Chen on 6 said the man in 7B had lived there longer than anyone could remember, kept to himself, paid his rent on time. Quiet as a ghost, she said. Never any trouble. The Hendersons said they'd never heard a sound from his apartment, not music or television or footsteps, nothing. Diego from 5C said he'd tried to introduce himself once and gotten a polite nod, nothing more. Some people just want to be left alone, Diego said with a shrug, but this man wasn't leaving her alone. He was carrying her groceries every single night, wordless and faithful as sunrise. On the 28th night, Gemma stopped on the 6th landing and turned to face him. The jam jar sat on the windowsill beside them, 2 winters old and counting. "What's your name?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment, and in the dim stairwell light his eyes seemed to catch and hold illumination they shouldn't have had, like a cat's eyes in headlights. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful, each word emerging as if it cost something. "Octavian," he said. "Thorn, thank you," she said, "for helping me every night." He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that belonged to a different century, and continued up the stairs. After that, they spoke in small increments, a sentence every few nights. His voice always had that same quality, as if words were precious and finite. She learned he'd lived in the building a long time. She learned he didn't work, at least not in any conventional sense. She learned he kept unusual hours, like her awake when the rest of the world slept. She didn't learn what he was. Not yet. 3 months after Octavian started carrying her groceries, the letters arrived. Gemma found hers slipped under her door on a Tuesday morning. A crisp white envelope with a law firm's return address embossed in silver. Inside was a letter explaining that the building had been purchased by Morven Development Group, and all tenants were being offered a generous buyout, $30,000 to vacate within 60 days. The letter was polite and professional and utterly inflexible. She stood in her tiny kitchen, still in her hospital scrubs, and read it 3 times. $30,000 was more money than she'd ever had at once, but it wasn't enough for first, last, and deposit in any neighborhood she could safely walk through at midnight. It wasn't enough to start over. By that evening, the entire building was buzzing. Everyone had gotten the same letter. The Hendersons were taking the money. Their daughter in Phoenix had been asking them to move closer for years. Mrs. Chen was in tears. She'd lived here for 37 years, since she'd emigrated. Diego was furious, already on the phone with the tenants' rights organization. The young couple on 2 were relieved. They'd been trying to save for a house anyway. Gemma knocked on every door on the 7th floor. Octavian's last. He answered immediately, as if he'd been standing on the other side waiting. His apartment behind him was dark. She couldn't see past him into it. "Did you get a letter?" she asked. "Yes. Are you taking it?" Something moved in his expression too quick to name. "No." "Good," she said. "Neither am I. We should organize. All the tenants who want to stay. Fight this." He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the strangest feeling he was seeing something about her that she didn't know was visible. "Yes," he said finally. "We should." They held the first meeting in Gemma's apartment because it was slightly larger than Diego's, and because she'd been the one to organize it. 17 people crammed into her living room, sitting on her thrift store furniture in the floor. Diego had brought information about rent control laws and tenant protections. Mrs. Chen had brought cookies. Octavian stood in the corner by the window, barely speaking, but when he did, everyone listened. There was something about him that commanded attention without demanding it. "Why do they want the building?" someone asked. "It's not worth developing. The neighborhood's not gentrifying that fast." "There must be something else," Diego said. "Some value we're not seeing." Gemma watched Octavian's face, saw something close there, some door locking. The meetings continued twice a week. They pooled money for a lawyer, filed injunctions, made noise at city council meetings. Morven Development Group's representatives were polite and immovable, raising their offer to $40,000, then $50,000. Some tenants took it. The building emptied slowly, like air from a leaking tire. Gemma found herself spending more time with Octavian, planning strategy over her kitchen table while the city slept around them. He was intelligent in a way that suggested centuries of learning, though she couldn't have said why she thought of it in those terms. He understood people, knew how to organize them, how to find their strengths. Under his quiet guidance, their resistance became formidable. She also found herself watching him in ways that had nothing to do with tenant organizing. The way he moved through her small apartment like water, never bumping anything, always knowing where the space was. The way he listened when she talked, with an attention so complete it was almost unsettling. The way he sometimes looked at her and she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced, as if he was reading not just her face but something deeper. He never ate or drank anything she offered, never arrived before sunset, never stayed past the earliest hints of dawn. She was starting to understand what he was, even if her rational mind kept rejecting it. The confirmation came on a night in late October, 4 months after the letters had arrived. They'd won a temporary injunction and she'd bought wine to celebrate. Octavian had declined, as always, but sat with her while she poured herself a glass. "You never eat," she said. The wine made her bold. "Never drink. I've never seen you during the day. Your skin is cold. Your eyes do that thing in the dark." He went very still. "I'm not stupid," she said quietly. "And I've read enough books." "Yes," he said after a long moment. How old are you?" 347 years. The number sat between them like a stone. Gemma took a drink of wine, felt it burn down her throat, grounding her in her own warm living body. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "I don't tell anyone. Haven't in 40 years. Why not?" His face did something complicated. Pain and old anger and something else she couldn't name. "Because the last time I acknowledged what I was, people died. Someone I loved died. And I decided I was done with all of it." She wanted to reach across the table and take his hand, but something about the set of his shoulders warned her not to. "The building," she said instead. "They want it because of you, because of what's under it." "There's a vault," he said, "sealed. Beneath the foundations, access through the old basement. It's been locked for 40 years, and I'm the only one who can open it. What's in it? Power, old blood, artifacts, things that should stay buried. And the development company? A front. There's a faction in the court. They want access to what's below. They've been looking for 40 years. They finally found me." Gemma set down her wineglass. "Court? Vampire court. There's a whole world under the city in the deep places. Tunnels and halls and chambers. A kingdom that predates the subways. I was part of it once." His voice had gone flat, carefully empty. "I was king." The word hung in the air between them. King. Gemma looked at this man who carried her groceries in silence, who lived in a small apartment and helped organize tenant meetings, and tried to reconcile it with royalty. You abdicated? In everything but title. The title can't be abdicated, it's bound by blood and ritual. But I haven't gone down in 40 years. Haven't exercised authority or taken part in politics or accepted any of it. Why? His hands were flat on her table, very still. She could see the control it took to keep them that way. There was a ritual. Blood right meant to consolidate power, bind certain families to the throne. It was traditional, supposedly safe. I permitted it. I was young for a king, only a century old, and I listened to advisors who said it was necessary. He stopped, and when he continued, his voice was barely audible. My sister was part of it, Vivienne. She was younger than me, barely 50 years turned. Something went wrong with the ritual. The blood turned black. She burned from the inside out, and I couldn't stop it. No one could. She screamed for 3 hours before she died. Gemma felt her heart break for him, this ancient king who'd been carrying that for decades. I walked away that night, Octavian said. Sealed the ritual chamber, sealed everything connected to it, and came up into the human world. Found the first apartment I could rent and stayed there. This building, this room 3 doors down, I've been here ever since. And you don't speak much because the last time I used my authority, my words, my power, my sister died screaming. So I decided to say as little as possible. To be as little as possible. She did reach for him then, covered his cold hand with her warm one. He looked down at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what touch felt like. I'm sorry, she said. It was my fault. It was an accident. I was responsible. I permitted it. I carry it. They sat in silence for a while, her hand on his, the city breathing around them through the thin walls. What happens if they get into the vault? She asked finally. If someone else breaks the seal, the protections fail and everything inside corrupts. Becomes poisonous, dangerous. If I open it, the contents are stable. Either way, once it's open, they'll take what they want. Use it to shift power in the court. Start wars, probably. A lot of people will die, and if you don't open it, they'll keep pushing. Evict everyone, tear the building down, try to break in. They might succeed. Or they might just destroy everything trying. Gemma looked around her small apartment, thought of Mrs. Chen and Diego and everyone else still fighting to stay. Thought of this man who'd been hiding from himself for 4 decades, carrying groceries in silence as penance. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. His hand turned under hers, gripped her fingers. For 40 years I've known exactly what I wanted to do. Nothing. Be nothing. And it's been easier than I expected because no one knew where I was. But now you're here and you're fighting for this place and you're so... He stopped, seemed to struggle for words. You make me want to try again, want to be something again, and that terrifies me. I'm just a hospital kitchen worker who can't afford to move, she said, but her heart was beating faster. You're the woman who organized an entire building, who knocked on every door and convinced people to fight, who looks at me and sees me, really sees me, and doesn't turn away. His eyes met hers, ice and intensity. You're extraordinary, Gemma, and I've been in love with you since the first night I carried your groceries. And you didn't even seem surprised by the help, just accepted it like kindness was normal. The words settled into her bones, warm and right. She'd known, she realized. Had known for weeks, maybe months. Had felt it in every silent climb, every careful placement of bags at her door, every meeting where he'd watched her with those ancient eyes. I'm mortal, she said. It seemed important to name it. I know. I have maybe 60 more years if I'm lucky. I know. And you've already lived 347. I know. His grip tightened on her hand. And I don't care. I've had centuries, Gemma. Empty years full of nothing that mattered. I'd trade all of them for 1 real year with you. She stood up, came around the table and kissed him. His lips were cool against hers, but they warmed quickly. And when he rose to meet her, he was gentle and careful and utterly controlled until she pressed closer and felt that control fracture. His hands came up to frame her face, and he kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least she was breathing hard, he was doing an excellent impression of it. She rested her forehead against his. We should save the building first, she said. Then we can figure out the rest. Yes, he agreed. We should. The next night, 3 people came to Gemma's door. She knew immediately they weren't human. They had the same quality Octavian did, that uncanny grace, that sense of being more present than normal people. 2 men and 1 woman, all pale and elegant in dark clothes. Gemma Oaks, the woman said. Her hair was white blonde, swept up in an intricate style. Her eyes were red, actually red like rubies. We're looking for someone. We believe you might know where he is. I know a lot of people, Gemma said, blocking her doorway with her body. A king, one of the men said. He was shorter than Octavian, but broader, built like a soldier. Our king, who has been absent from his throne for too long. Don't know any kings, Gemma said. The woman smiled, and her teeth were very white. We've been patient, generous even. But the time for patience is ending. We need access to what's below this building, and only Octavian Thorne can grant it. Tell him the court requests his presence. Tell him Severin sends regards. Tell Severin," Octavian's voice came from behind them, cold and level, "that the court can request all it likes. I am not obligated to answer." All three visitors turned, and Gemma saw something remarkable. They bowed. Not a casual nod, but a full formal bow, the kind that belonged in throne rooms. Octavian stood in the hallway in jeans and a dark sweater, but he held himself like royalty, spine straight and chin up, radiating authority he hadn't shown before. "Majesty," the woman said, rising. "It's been too long. Not long enough, Ileana. The vault must be opened. You know this." "I know that Severin wants it opened. That's not the same thing." The soldier type spoke up. "The court is divided, Majesty. Without your presence, without your authority, we're fracturing. Houses are choosing sides. There will be war if you don't return and stabilize things." "Then there will be war," Octavian said flatly. "I'm not coming back." "The seal is yours," Ileana said. "You must open it or break it. Those are the only options. There's a third option. It stays sealed and you all leave my neighbors alone. You know we can't do that." Ileana's voice was gentle, almost pitying. "Severin is coming himself, Majesty. He'll be here within the month. And he will have the vault, one way or another. We came first to offer you the chance to open it properly, to save what's inside, to prevent disaster. But if you refuse, he'll do what he must. Let him try." The three visitors exchanged glances. The soldier spoke again. "If he breaks the seal by force, everything inside will corrupt. You know this. It could poison the entire underground, kill hundreds. Humans too if it reaches the water table." Octavian's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. "You have 2 weeks," Ileana said. "After that, Severin arrives and the choice is out of all our hands." She bowed again, the other two following suit, and they left down the stairwell, moving like shadows. Gemma waited until she heard the ground floor door close, then went to Octavian. He was still standing rigid, staring at nothing. "Who's Severin?" she asked. "My cousin. Second in line to the throne, or he was. He's been ruling as regent since I left, growing his own power base. He wants the vault because there are artifacts inside that could let him claim the throne outright, override the bloodline. Make himself king in truth, and if he breaks the seal." The soldier was right. "Everything inside will turn toxic. It could spread through the underground, poison the blood stores, contaminate the water. Hundreds dead, maybe thousands. Human and vampire both." Gemma processed this, tried to think strategically. "So we have 2 weeks to figure out another option." "There is no other option. I open it or he breaks it. Either way, he gets what he wants." "No," Gemma said firmly. "Either way is not the same. If you open it, you control what happens next. If he breaks it, people die. If I open it, I have to go back down, reclaim authority, be king again." "Yes." He looked at her, and his eyes were full of old pain. "I can't. You can," she said. "You're just afraid." "Of course I'm afraid. The last time I acted as king, Vivian died. The last time you acted as king, you were a century old and listening to bad advisors. You're 347 now. You're not the same person. I'm not a person at all." She grabbed his arms, made him look at her. "You're the man who's carried my groceries every night for months. Who helped organize this building. Who just stood up to 3 vampires to protect me and everyone else here. You're already acting like a king, Octavian. You just haven't admitted it." He closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked unbearably tired, the weight of centuries showing in his face. "I don't know if I can do it again," he said quietly. "Don't know if I can carry that responsibility." "You don't have to carry it alone," she said. "I'll be there. Every step. You're mortal." "So? I've been going down to the city council meetings with Diego. I think I can handle a vampire court." That surprised a laugh out of him, short and rusty but real. "It's not the same. Then you'll protect me and I'll keep you from disappearing into your own head. We'll be a team." He opened his eyes, looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If I do this, if I go back down there, reclaim authority, open the vault, I'm doing it for you, not for them. Not for duty or responsibility or any of it. For you, I can live with that," she said. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, and she held on to him and thought about the future they were choosing, all the complications and impossibilities of it, and decided she didn't care. The next 13 days were a controlled chaos of preparation. Octavian began making contact with the underground, sending messages through channels Gemma didn't fully understand. Allies started appearing, vampires who remembered his reign and wanted him back. They met in Gemma's apartment because Octavian still refused to go below, and she watched him shift between the quiet neighbors she'd known and something else, something commanding and powerful. Diego and Mrs. Chen were bewildered by the sudden influx of extremely pale visitors, but Jiva told them the truth. Diego didn't believe her until one of the visitors demonstrated impossible speed. Mrs. Chen just nodded and said she'd suspected something supernatural about the building for years. The way the basement was always locked, and sometimes you could hear things that weren't rats. They made plans. Octavian would go down on the 14th day. the night before Severin arrived. He'd reclaim his throne, assert his authority, and open the vault under controlled conditions. He'd catalog what was inside, seal away the dangerous artifacts, and establish new protections. Then he'd negotiate with the court, create a permanent covenant to protect the building and its tenants, and seal the vault forever. And then? Gemma asked on the 13th night, alone with him in her apartment. Then I step back down, Octavian said. Reclaim just enough authority to make the orders stick, then refuse recrowning. Make it clear I'm not coming back to rule. Can you do that? I'm already king. The blood right binds me to the throne whether I'm actively ruling or not. I can exercise authority without accepting the crown again. It's a technicality, but it should work. Should. Will, he corrected and pulled her close. It will work because I'm not losing this, not losing you. She settled against his chest, listened to the heart that beat so much slower than hers. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. So am I. We'll be terrified together. The 14th day arrived too quickly. Gemma called in sick to work, the first time she'd done so in 2 years. She wasn't climbing those stairs without Octavian beside her, and he couldn't go until full dark. They descended together at midnight, down past her 7th floor, past all the familiar landings, down to the ground floor, and then further, through a basement door she'd never seen open. Behind it were stone steps, old and worn smooth, leading down into darkness that her flashlight barely touched. Octavian didn't need the light. He moved with perfect confidence, and she kept her hand in his and followed. Down and down, much further than 7 flights, into the deep places under the city. The air grew colder, and she could hear water somewhere and other sounds she couldn't identify. They emerged into a vast hall carved from living rock, lit by some sourceless blue-white glow that hurt her eyes. Vampires were gathered there, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all pale and elegant and inhuman. They turned as one when Octavian appeared, and the silence was absolute. He walked forward, and Gemma walked with him, very aware that every eye was on her, the mortal woman holding the lost king's hand. He led her to a raised dais where a throne sat, black stone carved with intricate patterns. He didn't sit on it. I am Octavian Thorne, he said, and his voice carried through the hall without shouting, resonant with power Gemma had never heard from him. King by blood and right, I've been absent. That ends tonight for this purpose only. I'm here to open the sealed vault, to catalog and protect what's inside, and to establish new law regarding the building above. After that, I'm leaving again. If anyone has objections, speak now. A man stepped forward from the crowd, tall and white-haired like Octavian but heavier, dressed in dark red. His eyes were the same ruby color as Ileana's. Cousin, he said, and his voice was smooth as silk. How kind of you to finally return. We've managed without you, you know. Perhaps we should continue doing so, Severin. Octavian didn't move, but something about him intensified, became more present. You've been regent. That ends now, does it? You abandoned your throne. Abandoned us all. You have no right to simply return and demand obedience. I have every right. I'm king. The blood knows it. The throne knows it, and you know it. Octavian's voice was cold and absolutely certain. I'm not asking for your permission, Severin. I'm informing you of what will happen. Severin's smile was dangerous. And if I refuse to step aside, then I'll remove you. The tension in the hall was suffocating. Gemma squeezed Octavian's hand, and he squeezed back without looking at her, all his attention on his cousin. You haven't exercised power in 40 years, Severin said. You're weak from disuse and sentiment. His eyes flicked to Gemma. Bringing a mortal here proves it. You've gone soft. Test me and find out, Octavian said quietly. Severin laughed, but there was an edge to it. Very well, cousin. Open the vault, catalog the artifacts. We'll see how much authority you actually retain. He stepped back, and the crowd parted around him. Octavian led Gemma through the hall, through passages and chambers, deeper and deeper. Others followed at a distance, witnesses. They arrived at a massive door carved with symbols that seemed to move in the corner of her vision. Octavian released her hand and placed both palms flat against the stone. He spoke in a language Gemma didn't know, old and rhythmic, and the symbols on the door began to glow. Red first, then gold, then white. The door shuddered and swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Stay close, Octavian said to her, and they went inside. The vault was enormous, a cavern filled with artifacts on stone shelves. Gemma saw weapons that gleamed with their own light, books bound in materials she didn't want to identify, vessels filled with liquid that moved on its own, and in the center on a raised platform a small shrine. Octavian went to it immediately, and Gemma saw what it held, a portrait painted in exquisite detail of a young woman with white hair and a brilliant smile, Vivian, and beneath it a space clearly meant for something, currently empty. Her ashes were supposed to be here, Octavian said, his voice rough with emotion. I sealed the vault before the rites could be completed. She's been waiting for 40 years. Gemma touched his arm gently. Then let's finish it. He nodded, straightened, and turned to the watching crowd at the vault's entrance. Bring the ritual materials. I'm giving my sister the rights she should have had 40 years ago, tonight, before anything else happens." There was a flurry of activity. Vampires disappeared and returned with ceremonial items, candles and bowls, and carefully measured portions of blood. Octavian directed them with calm authority, and they obeyed without question. Whatever Severin's challenges, the court still recognized their true king. The ritual took hours. Gemma watched from beside the shrine as Octavian spoke the old words, lit the candles in specific order, poured blood that burned with blue fire into the bowls. Other vampires joined in, those who had known Vivian, speaking memories and blessings. It was beautiful and strange and deeply sad, a goodbye 40 years overdue. When it was done, a small crystal vessel appeared on the shrine beneath Vivian's portrait, filled with light that slowly faded to a gentle glow. Her ashes, Gemma realized, finally at rest. Octavian stood before the shrine for a long moment, his head bowed. Then he turned to face the assembled court. "The vault will be catalogued," he said. "Dangerous artifacts will be sealed separately, safe ones distributed to appropriate houses under strict covenant. This chamber will be blessed and warded, and the building above will be placed under permanent protection. No vampire may threaten its tenants, purchase it through proxy, or attempt to access what's below without my express permission. These terms are non-negotiable." Severin had appeared in the vault entrance, watching. "And what do we get in return for accepting your terms, cousin? You can't simply demand and expect obedience without offering something." "I'm offering stability," Octavian said. "I'm offering proper leadership for the duration of this transition. And I'm offering to not execute you for treason, which I would be within my rights to do." That caused a stir in the crowd. Severin's expression darkened. "You've been using the court's desperation to build your own power base," Octavian continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the vault, "promising access to these artifacts in exchange for loyalty, planning to use them to override the bloodline and claim the throne yourself. Did you think I wouldn't learn this? That my allies wouldn't inform me?" "Your allies are few," Severin said. "Mine are many. Then let's test it." Octavian raised his voice. "Who here stands with Severin's claim to the throne?" Perhaps a third of the assembled vampires stepped forward. Gemma's heart sank. That was a lot. "And who stands with the rightful king?" Another third stepped forward, and Gemma breathed a little easier. "And who is undecided?" The final third remained where they were, watching carefully. "Those are your numbers, Severin," Octavian said. "A third, not a majority. Not enough to claim rule. You've been regent, and you've done adequately, but the court doesn't actually want you as king. They want me to come back." "Then come back," Severin said sharply. "Truly return. Accept recrowning, take up your throne, rule as you're meant to. But you won't, will you? You'll make your little proclamations, set your terms and disappear again. That's not a king, that's a coward." Gemma felt Octavian tense beside her, felt the anger rise in him. She touched his hand, grounding him. "You're right," Octavian said, and the admission surprised everyone. "I've been a coward. For 40 years, I've been hiding from responsibility, from power, from everything that happened. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm here. I'm exercising my authority. I'm doing what needs to be done. But I'm doing it on my terms, not yours." He stepped forward closer to Severin, and his presence seemed to fill the vault. "I'm king by blood right, Severin. That doesn't end because I choose not to sit on a throne. The power is mine whether I use it or not, and I'm using it now to tell you that your reach for the crown is over. Step down. Accept the terms I'm setting, or challenge me directly and see what happens." Severin stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then he inclined his head, not quite a bow. "I accept your terms, Majesty, for now." "For always," Octavian corrected. "Or we can settle this right here, right now. Your choice." Another long pause. Then Severin bowed, a proper full bow, and stepped back. "For always," he agreed, and there was hatred in his voice but also acknowledgement. The court relaxed slightly, and Gemma realized she'd been holding her breath. The cataloging took 3 more days. Gemma stayed the whole time, sleeping in a chamber Octavian had prepared for her, eating food that was brought from the surface. She watched him work, directing teams of vampires through the vault, examining each artifact, making decisions about disposition and security. He was magnificent in his authority, commanding without being cruel, fair in his judgments, clearly knowledgeable about things that were ancient before she was born. She also watched the court watch him, saw the way they responded, the way even those who'd sided with Severin began to show respect. This was their king, the one they'd missed, and his return was settling something in them, even if it was temporary. On the 4th day, Octavian sealed the most dangerous artifacts in a separate chamber, with protections that made Gemma's teeth ache when she got too close. On the 5th day, he distributed the safe items to various houses, each one accepting with formal oaths and binding promises. On the 6th day, he called the full court to assembly and laid out the covenant protecting the building. "The structure known as the Meridian Apartments and all its tenants are under my personal protection," he declared, standing before the throne without sitting on it. No vampire may purchase it through proxy, threaten its inhabitants, or attempt to access the sealed vault beneath it. The vault will remain locked. The wards I've set will not be broken. Any violation of these terms is a direct challenge to my authority and will be treated as treason. Do you all accept these terms? The court accepted, even Severin, with formal oaths that Gemma was told were magically binding. Good, Octavian said. Then the business is concluded. Severin, you'll continue as regent for day-to-day governance. Major decisions come to me for approval, but I'm trusting you to manage the court's needs. Prove that trust is not misplaced. Severin looked like he was swallowing glass, but he nodded. As for recrowning, Octavian continued, and the whole court seemed to lean forward. I decline. I'm king by blood and right, and that's enough. I don't need a crown to prove it, and I don't need to sit on this throne every day. I'll exercise authority when necessary, but I'm not returning to full rule. That part of my life is over. There were murmurs, some disappointed, some accepting. Ileana stepped forward. Majesty, the court needs you, more than these limited terms. The court needs stability and fair governance, Octavian corrected. I've provided both. What you want is someone to make decisions for you so you don't have to face uncertainty. That's not my responsibility anymore. I've given you structure. Use it. He looked out over the assembled vampires, these ancient powerful beings, and spoke with finality. I've spent 40 years learning to be something other than a king, learning to live small and quiet and human in all the ways that matter. And I've found that life suits me better than this throne ever did. I'm not abandoning you, I'm choosing a different path. And I'm choosing it from strength, not weakness. He held up his hand, and in it was a small metal object, a key. The building above now has a working elevator. The covenant I've established funds its maintenance in perpetuity, along with other improvements. It's a small thing maybe, but it matters to the people who live there. That's the kind of power I want to exercise now. Not ruling kingdoms, but carrying groceries and fixing elevators and helping people organize against forces they don't understand. Gemma felt her heart swell with love for this impossible man who'd been a king and chosen to be kind instead. I'm leaving now, Octavian said. The vault is sealed, the court is stable, and my sister has her rights. My work here is done. He stepped down from the dais and held out his hand to Gemma. She took it, and together they walked through the court, through the hall of vampires who bowed as they passed. Behind them, she heard Severin's voice, quiet and bitter. He's choosing a mortal over his own people. And Ileana's response, thoughtful. No, he's choosing himself, finally. They climbed back up through the deep places, through passages and chambers, up the old stone stairs to the basement, through the door and into the familiar stairwell. 7 flights, 19 steps each, except for the 4th floor, which had 20. The burnt-out bulb on the 3rd landing was glowing now, new. The folding chair on the 5th had been removed, the space clean. The jam jar was gone from the 6th floor windowsill. At the 7th floor, where both their apartments waited, there was something new, an elevator, shining and modern with brass doors and a small plaque that read, Meridian Apartments in Perpetuity. Mrs. Chen was standing in the hallway with Diego and the Hendersons and at least a dozen other tenants, all staring at the elevator in wonder. Did you know about this? Mrs. Chen asked when she saw them. It's part of the new building covenant, Octavian said, among other protections. What kind of covenant? Diego asked suspiciously. The kind that means you'll never be evicted, your rent will never be raised beyond reasonable rates, and the building will be maintained properly. Legally binding, magically enforced. Magically, Diego repeated flatly. Yes, right, because you're a vampire king. Yes. Diego looked at Mrs. Chen. Are we all just accepting this now? I think we are, she said, and pressed the elevator button. The doors opened smoothly and she laughed with delight. 42 years. 42 years I've been climbing these stairs and now we have an elevator. Everyone in, Gemma said impulsively. Let's all ride together. They crowded into the elevator, all the remaining tenants of the 7th floor and several from below. It was a tight fit, but no one minded. Gemma stood pressed against Octavian, his arm around her waist, and felt happier than she could remember being. Mrs. Chen pressed the button for the ground floor. The elevator descended smoothly, quietly, perfectly. When the doors opened on the lobby, everyone piled out laughing and talking, examining the miracle of a working elevator like it was made of gold. Gemma and Octavian rode it back up alone. That was a good idea, he said. The elevator. It was a perfect idea, she said. Practical magic, the kind that actually helps people. It's going to be strange, he said quietly, living a mortal lifetime, knowing it will end. It would be stranger to live forever, she said, every moment mattering less because there's always another one coming. That's exactly what it feels like, felt like, past tense. He pulled her closer. I've already lived centuries, Gemma, seen empires rise and fall, watched the world change in ways I never imagined. And none of it mattered as much as carrying your groceries up 7 flights of stairs. That's very romantic, she said. Except the part about the groceries. Especially the part about the groceries, he corrected. That's when I knew. That's when I felt something shift. This mortal woman with her hands full, climbing toward home, and I wanted to help. Not because of duty or responsibility or power, just because you needed help and I could give it. The elevator reached 7 and the doors opened. Their floor. Their home. I love you, Gemma said. Simple words, but they held everything. I love you, Octavian said, for whatever time we have, however long or short. Probably 60 years, she said, give or take. 60 years, he repeated, like he was tasting the words. I'll take it. I'll take every moment. They walked to her apartment, and he carried her across the threshold just to make her laugh. Inside, the space felt different somehow, lighter. She realized it was because the weight he'd been carrying was gone. He'd faced his past, honored his sister, reclaimed his authority, and then put it down again on his own terms. What do we do now, she asked. Now? He considered. I think we live, really live. You go to work at the hospital kitchen. I find something useful to do with my time. We climb stairs together or take the elevator. We organize tenant meetings. We exist in the small, beautiful moments that make up a life. That sounds perfect, she said. And it was. The seasons turned. Gemma continued working at St. Catherine's Hospital, and Octavian started volunteering there too, helping in the blood bank during night shifts, which everyone agreed he was mysteriously good at. They became a fixture in the building. The couple in 7A and 7B who eventually knocked down the wall between apartments to make one larger space. Mrs. Chen taught Gemma to make dumplings and told Octavian stories about the building's history, which he listened to with perfect attention even though he'd lived through most of it. Diego started a tenants association with Gemma as treasurer and Octavian as legal advisor, and they successfully blocked 3 more development attempts over the years. The Hendersons moved to Phoenix, but new families moved in. Young couples, old couples, people who needed a place that was safe and affordable and protected. The building became known as a good place to live, one of those rare spots in the city where rent was fair and maintenance actually happened, and neighbors looked out for each other. Octavian went down to the court once a year, on the anniversary of Vivienne's death, to tend her shrine and ensure the vault remained secure. Gemma went with him every time, and the court grew accustomed to seeing their king's mortal partner, this human woman who'd organized him back into authority, and then helped him walk away from it. Severin remained regent and proved to be competent if not inspired. The court stabilized, found its rhythm, and mostly left Octavian alone. Ileana visited sometimes, bringing news from below, accepting tea in their apartment while discussing vampire politics and human tenant laws with equal interest. 5 years in, Gemma was promoted to kitchen supervisor. 10 years in, she was diagnosed with early arthritis in her knees from all those years climbing stairs, and Octavian learned massage therapy to help with the pain. 15 years in, they threw a building-wide party for the elevator's anniversary, and Mrs. Chen made a cake shaped like the building. 20 years in, Gemma started seeing silver in her hair. She was 44 years old, and Octavian was 367, and the math of their relationship was starting to show. She could see it in the way he looked at her sometimes, aware of every line that appeared on her face. Every morning she woke up a little stiffer than before. I'm getting old, she said one night, lying in bed beside him. I know. It's going to get worse, I know. Eventually I'm going to die, I know. His voice was steady, but she heard the pain underneath. Are you sorry that we did this? He turned to face her, and his eyes were fierce. Never, not for a single moment. Every year with you has been worth everything that comes after. What will you do when I'm gone? I don't know, he admitted. I've been trying not to think about it. You should think about it, she said gently. Make plans. Don't lock yourself away again. I'll probably lock myself away again, he said honestly. For a while, grieve. Then maybe I'll find another building to live in quietly, another set of stairs to climb. I'm good at existing in small spaces now. You taught me that. I want you to be happy, she said. Even after, I'll try, he promised. But it won't be the same. Nothing ever is. They held each other in the darkness, and Gemma felt the peculiar bittersweetness of loving someone who would outlive her by centuries. But she'd known this going in, had chosen it with open eyes, and she didn't regret it. 25 years in, Gemma retired from the hospital. They threw her a party and gave her a plaque, and she came home to the building that had been protected by a vampire king's covenant and thought about all the lives those protections had touched. Families who'd stayed secure, children who'd grown up safe, a community that had thrived because one powerful being had chosen to use his power for small good things. 30 years in, Mrs. Chen died peacefully in her sleep at age 94. The whole building mourned, and Octavian carried her casket with Diego and 4 others, moving with the same careful grace he'd once used to carry groceries. They planted a tree in the tiny courtyard behind the building, and Gemma thought about mortality and legacy and the marks people left behind. 35 years in, Gemma's arthritis was bad enough that she needed a cane sometimes. Octavian, who looked exactly as he had the night they met, walked slowly beside her and pretended he didn't notice when she needed to rest. They still took the elevator most of the time now, but occasionally she'd insist on the stairs, on climbing those 7 flights together, holding his hand and remembering when she'd carried groceries alone. 40 years in, Diego's grandson moved into the building with his wife and new baby. They took over the Tenants Association, bringing new energy, and Gemma and Octavian became the building's elders, the ones who held institutional knowledge and helped settle disputes. 45 years in, on a summer evening that smelled like rain, Gemma sat in their apartment and looked at Octavian across the table where they'd had that first real conversation, where she'd learned what he was and chosen to love him anyway. "I'm 69 years old," she said. "And I'm tired. I know. I don't regret any of it, I know. When it happens, don't seal yourself away for too long. Promise me, Gemma, promise me," she insisted. "Grieve, yes, take time, but then come back out, help people. Carry someone's groceries, be kind. That's who you are now, and I don't want you to lose that." "I promise," he said, and his voice broke on the words. She reached across the table and took his hand, warm against cold, mortal against immortal, and held on. 4 more years they had. 4 years of gradual slowing, of Gemma's body betraying her bit by bit while her mind stayed sharp. 4 years of Octavian learning to let her go while still holding tight. 4 years of small moments and quiet love and the knowledge that time was running out. She died on a Tuesday morning in early spring, 73 years old, with Octavian holding her hand and the sunrise spilling through their window. Her last words were, "Thank you for carrying my groceries," and she was smiling. Octavian kept his promise. He grieved, deeply and privately, for 3 months. Then he emerged from the apartment and started helping around the building again. Fixed the elevator when it stuck. Organized a new community garden. Carried groceries for the young mother on 5 who reminded him of Gemma, all determination and kindness. He stayed in the building for another 20 years, a constant quiet presence, and then he disappeared one night. The apartment's empty and clean, a note left for the Tenants Association thanking them and releasing the covenant into their collective stewardship. But the magic held. The building stayed protected, the elevator kept running, and rent remained fair. The community thrived. And every year on the anniversary of the covenant, someone would find flowers on Gemma's grave in the cemetery across town, white roses that couldn't have grown naturally in that season. People said the building was blessed. They said a vampire king had loved a mortal woman there, and his magic still kept them safe. They said if you climbed the stairs late at night, you could sometimes hear footsteps that weren't quite there, ascending steadily, carrying invisible burdens with infinite patience. Diego's great-grandson, living in the building with his own family, told the story to his children. About the woman who'd organized the tenants and the silent neighbor who'd carried her groceries. About a king who'd chosen kindness over power. About love that transcended mortality and magic that came from small, repeated acts of service. The children asked if it was true, and he said yes, every word. He'd seen the proof in the building that should have been torn down but still stood. In the elevator that never broke down. In the community that took care of its own because 2 people had shown them how. The story lived on, passed down through generations. A fairy tale that was real. And somewhere in the world, a vampire with white hair and ice-colored eyes carried someone's groceries up a flight of stairs and remembered what it felt like to love and be loved in return. The Meridian apartment stood for another 100 years. Protected by a covenant made in love and sealed in magic, and that ultimately was their happily ever after. Not immortality, not forever, but a mortal lifetime lived fully and a legacy that lasted long past it. Small kindnesses that rippled outward. Love that changed everything. 7 flights, no elevator until there was one. A vampire king who carried groceries and never said a word until he did. A mortal woman who saw past the monster to the man and loved him for exactly who he was. And a building full of people who were safe because 2 impossible people had found each other in a stairwell and decided to make the world a little bit better, one small act at a time. That was the story. That was how it ended. With love and kindness and an elevator that still runs perfectly even now.